if not 100%, 80% of the test cases can be automatically generated. It just looks at the pattern of usage. These are not plain vanilla, go from point A to point B, done. One workflow is to say, no, it constantly monitors how the user is using, what features they're using, what order they're doing, not just from one user.
All right, we're live on another episode of Life Sciences 360, and today I have with me Nagesh Nama, and Nagesh is the CEO of XLM and Validation. So welcome to the show, Nagesh.
Harsh, good to be here. Good afternoon.
We're going to talk a lot about validation, software validation in life sciences, because I know that's where you have product and services through both your companies. But I want to start, I know I've seen your LinkedIn profile and you have this catchphrase, which I've heard you mention on your profile. When you talked to me the first time, you even said the word continuous validation. I know you're trying to hammer that point home. So how did you come about figuring out that was what you wanted to build your company or even explore? How did you come about deciding continuous validation was a place to explore?
Yeah, good question. To be honest with you, I was thinking of this concept way back in 2011, but XLM was born in 2016. So the idea was there. The reason I came up in 2011, if you remember, life science companies were not using cloud that much. Cloud itself was a baby, and on top of that, life science companies were not using. But I kind of internally, I bet that, the cloud is going to probably become a big deal. Meaning, I somehow saw that with AWS kind of being born then, Azure was its infancy. So I kind of used those products. Then I said, what if this thing comes to the validation world? Half of me said it will, half of me said maybe not, because life science is very conservative. They may not give the data out, meaning it won't be in the public cloud, for example. So I said, what if my job is eliminated? Meaning my job as a consultant is eliminated because the machine does the validation. Maybe there'll be a day when does. So can I make the best of both worlds? I've already worked in consulting since 1996, to be exact. So I have seen the world, the validation world, in the real world, in many parts of the real world, I've seen it. So I thought, what can I do? And it was just an idea that I had. And I was mulling over it. Then as I started using more and more of the cloud products, I said, I need to come up with something that will be the future of validation, in my opinion. That's what I wanted to do. Then I looked around. Not many people were talking about continuous validation in our space, in the life sciences space. So I said, okay, now is the time. So the idea is very simple. In a traditional validation, you write the user requirements, correct? Then the entire life cycle is about proving that the user requirement is correct. The design, the testing, the validation, ongoing basis, everything is kind of showing that, the user requirement is met. Now I'm thinking, if the platform is changing all the time, for example, Azure or GCP or AWS, and the software also may change, but not to that extent. Maybe you can control something at the software level, right? But still it will change probably on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. How about reversing that thing a little bit? Still, the concept is correct. The validation has to be done. So I was thinking, can I prove that instead of knowing the changes, can I constantly prove that the requirements have been met? Ultimately, FDA wants to make sure the requirements have been met. So that's why we have change control and all that good stuff. But if changes are happening that's beyond my control, what can I do? So I can look back and say, can I constantly show that my software is performing the way it's supposed to perform, irrespective of the changes? Of course, you still need some good practices of configuration management and all the good stuff. But in a public cloud, no matter what kind of configuration management you have, even if you know all the changes, it's impossible to validate. It's coming. It's like a train, pushed through the tunnel. So that's where the concept of continuous validation was born. So my idea was it could be run intermittently, maybe let's say every week, every month, after a patch or a release, or on almost a continuous. It cannot be continuous, meaning it's not constantly running.
Right.
It's just at a discrete event. Let's say every hour you can run it, every day you can run it. So that was the idea. And it's a little bit more than that, but the concept was that, can I build something making sure that my requirements are frozen? Then I need to constantly prove my requirements are met. No matter what happens to the platform, no matter what happens to the software. So that was kind of the premise. And I defined continuous validation that way. In spite of the unknown changes, can I prove my requirements have been met? So that's kind of the premise I took. It could be hybrid. Maybe you can meet halfway. But that was the idea. Even if I don't know the changes, I need to prove that my requirements are met.
Okay. So then from what you explained, it sounds like XLM is a suite or a platform where you can do, as you defined, continuous validation for a wide range of SaaS tools. Is that correct? So like which were the first like three or four that you started out building in your XLM?
Yeah, I mean, our platform can technically do any software validation. I mean, I can take the same engine, put it into a closed network, and it can test like manufacturing operations, for example, like custom HMIs and all that. We have done that. For large enterprises, we have done that. But typically, we want to target the cloud platform. Our first platform was Tracelink, the serialization platform. We did the serialization platform. Then we partnered with a company called audits, which has a QMS suite. We completely built a suite, the testing suite for product validation and also for the customer instance validation. So we did that. Then we did for AWS services, various services we qualify, not validation, but we did that automation for service qualification of AWS as well as Azure. We did that. Then we moved on to Viva, for example. We did Viva. So that went on after that. So we have done many, many, many platforms. I think over 20 plus platforms that we have done since 2016.
Interesting. And I'm sure you've come across this situation. So I don't want to ask you the question, have you come across? So what I'm going to ask you is how do you approach when you work with a client that wants to implement a SaaS tool, let's say anything, Viva, DocuSign, whatever.
Yep.
But let's say it's a new SaaS tool that nobody's used in life sciences, but they want how would you build that if it's a newer tool? Can you?
Yep. We started somewhere, right? Even Tracelink, we never had the suite. The first software platform that we validated, or SaaS platform that we validated, was Tracelink. So we never had the suite. So we had to build from scratch. So what happens is, if you already have the suite, let's say it could be a different customer, but if you already worked on the platform, it just becomes easier because you will know the nuances of the platform. We are quicker to respond, right? We can make it faster. Because no matter how much you know, you have to get your hands dirty. You need to know. Everybody says it will work nicely, but until you kind of go through the life cycle, right? You just don't know what you're getting into, right? It's like getting married. Yes, the date was good, and now I want to get married, but I don't know what I'm getting into.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
So anyway, so a customer, let's say, comes with platform X, and that was never validated by us. So the approach would be similar. Only thing is we have to invest a little bit more because otherwise they might find us cost prohibitive, right? Because we need to build the suite out. So that's the only difference. And the time will be a little bit longer. If I already have a suite like ServiceNow, we did ServiceNow a long time ago.
Yeah.
One of the first few platforms we did ServiceNow. So for us, ServiceNow is easy because we know their architecture. My team knows how the system is configured and everything else. Viva, same thing. So otherwise, maybe the time is a little bit longer. And we have to invest a little bit more because we hope that that platform will attract more customers so that the third, fourth, fifth customer will make a little bit more money compared to the first customer.
And faster, yeah.
And faster.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing. But other than that, approach is very same. There's no difference.
And then from given we're in life sciences, we can't really do anything without documentation.
Correct.
So is the XLM software or the product, is that capable of generating documents, or that is still a manual person for which you have consultants or manual task?
I wouldn't say it's 100% automation, meaning, first of all, there's no paper. We just don't use. We have a platform for not only the test automation, but all of our lifecycle management. We have a platform. So we are getting away from the concept of documents. Like URS is not a document for us. So every requirement is a task, for example, right? Or an issue or a record.
Yep.
So that's how I need to manage it individually because that will be mapped to a test automation suite or a specification. So it becomes a URS is basically a bunch of requirements. Each requirement is a record for us, but we can make it look like a document. We have templates where it takes all the tagged requirements for a project and creates a document. So my business analyst or the validation analyst will start with the plan. Once the plan is done, they will build these requirements working with the customer. In most cases, customer will give us the requirements, but in other cases, we collaboratively work. Right? It's like a back of the napkin kind of a thing. Then we kind of give them something to look at, then they will enhance it. Then that's all we need from our customer. If they can give us the requirements, great. Other than that, we don't need anything else from the customer. We need access to the tool or the SaaS platform. Just like a human being accesses, we can access it, but we can also access it via APIs. That's the only difference. not just the UI, but we can access with the APIs also. But still, we need the security access. And that's it. URS requirement, that's it. So what we do is we take that, we figure out the software. If we already have done it, it's easy. If it's not done it, then it's a little bit longer. They go through and kind of figure out how the software works. Then we document the configuration in a config spec. Again, it's a record by record. We run the record and trace it back to the requirements. We will do that. And once that is done, the sandbox is kind of frozen. Customer is happy. Design is kind of steady. Its config freeze happens. Then we get the config qualification or the config spec done. Then in the meantime, my validation analyst will build the workflows, meaning what workflows need to be validated. So that typically goes, end customer, we only do the UAT and the config qualification. That's it. There's no typical IQ, OQ, PQ. If you're doing a product validation, we typically do the IQ and OQ, and maybe even PQ, like a hypothetical customer. We put that, and like XLM Pharma kind of a company, and we kind of do the whole thing. So that's typically how we follow. And everything is electronic. The traceability is very easy for us to build. And the test automation script, we know how to do it, irrespective of the target technology, because mostly it's browser-based or API-based or a hybrid combination. And also we can, if there is a thick client, like a desktop client, we can also incorporate that into our workflow, the testing workflow, we can incorporate that. So once that is done, my developers don't freeze their code until all the testing is done and the draft scripts, automation scripts are reviewed, meaning the output is reviewed by my QA guys. Then they promote that code, the code reviews happen, they promote the code into the production pipeline. The developers don't have access to production pipeline. So the pipeline is a step-by-step. It knows exactly which code to retrieve. We use Microsoft DevOps for that. It goes, retrieves the code from Git, from the Git repository. It documents the pull request that's the code corresponds to. Then it builds the VM on the fly, loads all the tools that the VM needs, all done by scripting, no human intervention. It builds the VM, and you can say, I want Linux, I want Mac OS, whatever the end client operating system and the browser version is. We can build that, and any tools that have to be added, we can do that. And all the logs are there. How the VM itself is built. Every single thing is logged. Then when the VM is built, the test code is injected into the scripting is injected into the VM automatically again. Then it actually performs the test. Then we can even record the video of the test if you want it. And we normally take screenshots anyway, but video is an option. Then screenshots are taken. All the validation testing is completed at that time. And once that is done, it puts everything in a JSON format. The actual results, including the screenshots, any reports, everything is put in JSON format. And the PDF rendering will take that as a last step and generates a PDF. If it has attachments, it is like, let's say, for example, API responses, are attached as reports. And all this thing is built into a digitally signed PDF package. Everything is in one package. So a typical suite might have multiple PDFs, depending on how it's organized, but that's the package. And that can be either somebody can take that, review it, and manually give it to the customer via DocuSign or any of the Adobe Sign or one of these signature platforms, or it can be sent by email. Once they're okay, then they can DocuSign it and give us the signed copy so we can upload it. Or we can actually use APIs to send the document directly. Like DocuSign is very easy for us. We can actually route it to automatically to DocuSign if there is no failure. If there is a failure, then a ticket is opened and root cause analysis to be performed. RCS will be performed. That has its own life cycle. So in short, once the suite is built, it's promoted to production, the validation production environment, right? Everything is push button. There's absolutely no human intervention. We can do 100% automation. And at the end product is this digitally signed PDF with has all the timestamps, all the screenshots, all the reports. It look kind of like your manual executed thing. Only thing, the machine is doing all the work, and there's no human involved. The reason we did that was a lot of people do test automation, but the output doesn't match what life science companies expect, right? So you need to collect the output in a correct way and also build that into a format that your auditors will accept it. So that's what we have done. We build that rendering engine also, and that's standardized across customers. It's very configurable. We can change certain parameters and
like
make it
their logo or their confidentiality statement or instructions.
Everything we can add. It's not a problem for us. We can even add sequence charts. Like we can show how the software is navigating in a particular workflow. We can add sequence charts. So it's pretty modern compared to manual testing, and very easy to read. And it's fast. It might take, let's say, a manual test 8 hours. We could probably finish that in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Maybe even lesser. maybe in lesser.
You already answered my question. I was going to ask you, what was your like analysis of the numbers of manual versus yours, but you already answered. So 8 hours manual is 15 minutes
15 minutes, maybe
wow.
tops. Yeah, 15 minutes.
Crazy.
And if you really bump up the horsepower, sometimes what happens is, the target application slows down. Let's say we are fast, but target application cannot keep up. So we need to wait, just kind of slow down a little bit so a page gets loaded. If it's UI testing, API testing is typically very fast, but we can't do everything through APIs, right? It has to be through UI because the human interacts with the software via the UI. So I can't just use API. I can't justify using API in all cases. Some cases maybe, but not in all cases.
Very interesting. Yeah. Because I kind of knew a little bit about what the product does, but this last 5 minutes or so of how you explained right from the requirements to all the way getting the PDF report and how the I knew in my mind a little bit, but you just explained it in a much nicer and elaborated way. So thanks for that. You are in the validation space. For the last decade or so, you've been working on SaaS systems. So now I want to ask you like a forward-looking statement, because you figured out continuous validation. You invested, resources in building the platform and building the company. And now the new twist here is the influx of artificial intelligence tools, right? So slowly, as the industry accepts more technology or accepts more software with AI technology, and they get into the QMS and the validation and all the different use cases of the life sciences world, your challenge is now going to be not just SaaS systems, but SaaS with AI features, right? And so have you thought about how will you sort of morph your platform to cater to even those kind of use cases with AI coming in?
Yep. I want to answer your question in two separate sections.
Sure.
One is using AI within test automation, assuming the software is still a typical software, right? Like our standard software. That's one aspect of it. Next is obviously the target software itself has AI components. How are we going to validate it?
I meant the second one. I meant the second, but you can answer both. Yeah.
I'd like to answer both.
Yes.
Because that gives you the whole picture, right?
Right.
From a test automation point of view, there are many pain points in test automation. One is the UI changes very often, and especially with the cloud guys, like they might move a field, delete a field. I'm just giving a very simple example. There could be other changes also. So computer vision is really helping, because what happens is when you run computer vision models, or the modern test automation software, it can look at a data point or a screen object in many different ways. Typically, traditionally speaking, it always looks at the XPath, meaning it has a pointer to that object. So the testing robot can capture the document object model of the screen that you're seeing. Then it can really know, okay, this is the name of this particular object. I need to test that object. It doesn't care where it's really placed, but it goes like, okay, this is username or this is password. It knows the handle to that particular object and it does it. But what happens is, a lot of times that is dynamic. It's not static, and if the page is not coded correctly, it is a mess. It just, you cannot use it. So I cannot use bitmap. Olden days, we are talking about 20, 30 years ago, they would use bitmaps to position or know the object location. Those days, you can't do that, right? It's very archaic way of doing it. So with computer vision, this is solving a little bit of the problem. We are also experimenting with it so that a lot of the modern tools, we are changing we're upgrading our platform to XLM, the latest platform. And something that we are considering is one is computer vision, because we want to make sure that, minor changes, it can be self-healing. The script can be self-healing because that's a big maintenance overhead for us. Even if it's not self-healing, at least you tell us, this is why I failed on this particular page, So that is also, it makes it easier for me, run the whole script and undo it. It's a little bit challenging, but that's one thing that, that will really help. One is computer vision. And also, this log analysis, because we generate a lot of data, right? Let's say we are testing every week. I'm just giving that as an example. That means it's 52 runs in a year, just by going by that, So it could be because of changes, meaning new releases. It could be because of patches or because of nothing. You just ran a regression test. So when you have the data for different types of data points or the life cycle of a software in 1 year, right? So you have a lot of historical data now. That is still not big data, but it is, compared to a manual validation world, it's still more data, because manual testing will not give me that data. So now I can use the data to see whenever there's a new patch released, will I have a failure? Meaning our discrepancy is more compared to normal when there are no changes, nothing. Or maybe there are always bugs. We don't know. Like, maybe when the number of users that log on exceeds 100, when that happens, you get a lot of bugs, or tickets are opened because something is not working right. So that kind of a assurance, meaning you can look at the software assurance in a different way now, because you have more testing data. In the manual world, you could never do that. So, and also audit trail monitoring, that's a big problem, right? Just looking at audit trails and kind of raising tickets, hey, there's some abnormal activity or something happened, right? Or notification. That becomes very easy now with the log analysis. It's very easy with even the current tool set. It's very easy to do. So you can kind of include all these things, computer vision, log analysis, audit trail monitoring, historical data in a totally new way. Now, let's say you have, even before you go live, you can have 10 users using the software, just using the software like they would do. Maybe you can call it UAT, pre-UAT, whatever it is, but you can actually put agents that can study how the software is being used. Based on that, I can generate the test cases. If not 100%, 80% of the test cases can be automatically generated. It just looks at the pattern of usage. These are not plain vanilla, go from point A to point B, done, one workflow is said. No, it constantly monitors how the user is using, what features they're using, what order they're doing, not just from one user. One user over time, many users over time, it takes that and suggests, what kind of scripts you should be able to thinking about. So that is happening. And with our latest platform, let's say I'm a validation analyst, I can just easily go through and say, okay, this is the path I want to follow, kind of walk through the workflow. My 80% of the code is generated. It was done before also, but it was never that robust, meaning it didn't work well time and time again. But now it's almost like English. You can write the code in, you can look at the code that the system generates. It's very close to English, and it works very nicely. And that is being translated into complex Selenium code in the back. But in the front, you don't even need a coder. Basically, you need an analyst typing in all your scripts, meaning using the recorder, getting most of the script, then making some minor changes, you're done. You can run the script. It's that easy. So now I don't need a senior developer to do, the analyst can do. Because in our current model, the current platform we have is the analyst will write the feature file. What that means is that is like your test script. It's quasi-English. It's a login, a parameter, username, password, go here. So it's kind of that. And every line will have a test automation code, which the developers do. So that's how they do it. They design the feature file. Every line will have a code, and they make sure that the code gets executed. Now, the second piece is completely eliminated. When these guys write the feature file, it's pretty much that's the code I need. So these are the many changes that are coming, in the automation, the test automation. I can go on, but these are kind of the salient points. Salient points. Your second part of the question, obviously, this came to me even 3 years ago when ChatGPT was not even that well known, right? So this is definitely a challenge. My CTO is working on it. He comes from the e-commerce field where he dealt with fraud and all that,
right.
His old company would support the infrastructure for fraud detection. You're talking about transactions get executed in a fraction of a second and thousands of transactions going through, like credit card processing, a lot of analysis had to be done. So he's used to the AI being used in that space. So he has built those software models, software programs that actually provided these services. So we're very lucky to have him on board. So now we are looking at internally, if a biotech company or any company came to us, saying that we have an AI model, how are we going to validate it?
Right.
From a concept point of view, it is question of we need to go back and see how the data models is built, like what kind of data is fed initially and how it's corrected. That becomes a very important thing, right? Now, then after that, what kind of guardrails you're going to build, meaning it has to work in certain guardrails. It cannot go outside those guardrails. And what are those guardrails? Again, that depends on each different area, a domain. So these are something that industry is figuring it out. It's not that I have answers to all these things, but those things will be part of the validation now. We may not create those guardrails, but at least we will review those guardrails and say that, hey, one is the data model and how the data model is built. The next is the guardrails, that after the data model is working to a certain extent, the guardrails, that has to be done. Now my test automation comes into play. So now I can have to create many, many scenarios, right? And I'm equipped to do that. And I already know the expected result, like how the data modelers will do, right? They teach the software. When it gives up, no, you should not do this, because it's not acceptable because you need to correct it. That's how even ChatGPT was done. 1,000 guys kept feeding it, training it, basically.
Right.
Now I can use the training data, meaning just that instead of training, I'm going to be testing. But I know even before it gives me the output, what output to expect. We are also figuring it out. But, obviously, once we do some 10, 20 different models that we experiment with in terms of testing, we will definitely have a better answer. Maybe a year from now, I'll have better answers for you. But my CTO is already working on it, and we'll be making some announcements also in this area.
Interesting. Yeah. This is an area that I'm very passionate about, and I like learning. Obviously, like you said, we don't have all the answers yet because it's still most of the use cases I've heard are in e-commerce or social media or content creation. In these cases, there's no risk involved in using AI tools. Now, even if these tools are capable of doing tasks that you would do in a life science company, that doesn't mean we start using them. Like, I've seen many posts on LinkedIn and other social media platforms of people talking about, I used ChatGPT for doing X, Y, and Z, in life sciences, but without understanding, hey, you might have just exposed some data intentionally or unintentionally to this AI tool because it's a black box. You don't know who has access to it. Now the challenge is you don't even know how the machine is going to process that.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
So this is, to me, the modern struggle is not man versus machine. The modern struggle is man with machine and man without machine. Right?
No, I agree with you. And also, I would like to add one more thing. That's why I think even a continuous validation becomes a play. So as the models change, you don't know what answers it will give out. So we need to constantly test it now, right?
Yep.
Especially with critical areas where it's making critical decisions. So, you just cannot say, I'm going to test it once. Those days are gone now. It has to be like real-time testing. Your testing models are constantly running. And so that way the data scientists know if I feed this kind of input, what's the output I can expect. And based on that, and it has just a little bit flexible also. It cannot be very rigid also, but at the same time, the guardrails are built. So I think continuous validation becomes even more important given where we are heading in terms of AI and constant learning, constant output being given. But genomics, they're already using it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Genomics, drug discovery, R&D.
Exactly.
Yeah. Even for like forecasting during like mergers and acquisitions and like market analysis. So a lot of the fintech use cases, like big pharma, when they are scouting smaller companies and their financial analysis, their stock analysis. I've talked to one person, he's into investing in life sciences, and he helps life science companies go through these like analysis of, hey, this company at 5 billion is projected to make 8 billion over the next 2 years or whatever. So in those cases, yes, AI is amazing to do that kind of analysis of looking at a company's past 5 years and looking at its current numbers and doing the analysis. So yeah, that I've heard that as well. But validation, quality, compliance, reg affairs, these areas, I still not heard any use cases. But I'm sure that it will clinical trials. I've heard many, but not like clinical operations within a company. So yeah, but I do agree with your point, and this is kind of a good segue because I know you mentioned having those guardrails around data, and to me, it's like even with SaaS systems. Let's even go back before SaaS systems, before when it was mostly on-premise or desktop-based systems, data was still a challenge. And then even with SaaS systems, it became a bigger challenge because now a third party has basically access to data. You're just paying a subscription to use that software. And then when you're done, you get, but while you're using that software, there's no way to prevent, right? Somebody could get access to your data or whatever. So with AI, I feel like before a company even decides to invest in technologies with AI capabilities, I think they really have to tighten up their data governance strategy, because when they do come to somebody like you, who is a partner in helping them, you can't work with a client that is using an AI tool with a bad data governance strategy, because that's going to set you up for failure. What do you think about that?
No, even without AI, right? Data governance in the cloud is a challenge,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Because just to validate your vendor, meaning qualify your vendor, making sure that you understand all aspects of their platform, how the data is managed. Sometimes we are signing contracts very quickly. I'm just talking about life sciences.
Yep.
So as a consumer, it's different, but as a life sciences company, and I've been through some audits like that where they brought us in after the fact. They already signed up. Now they're finding it challenging. They don't understand. They said, Nagesh, can you just join our team, lead the audit thing? So, and that itself is becoming a challenge, right? So they need to have data governance, forget AI, just with using the cloud models, right? The cloud software itself, they should have a very good way to analyze their vendors, right? And make sure that contractually they've buttoned it up. They have to make sure that, because data is important to us. Ultimately, what does my software do? It generates data, correct? It's generating records, files, all kinds of data, correct? So they need to have that, and that discipline I've not seen in all instances. So it's very important. Some of the mature pharma companies and some of the mature software vendors, they already have all this in the contract. It's clearly laid out the data governance strategies, and they'll have third-party audits performed on the data governance strategies, and they'll be certified also by third-party audits. But some of the smaller ones, our customers have hired us to do the data governance strategies, just to understand how the data lifecycle works, right? Once the data is, it's not just creating the data, but also in real time, is it replicated? What is the point of failure? And what about your cybersecurity? And who has access to the data? So there are many aspects that we need to, even if something is broken, how do you even get notified? Like, how do you even know that somebody is in there? What are the monitoring systems there? So it's easier said than done, but we normally do those audits also to make sure that the SaaS provider has this governance framework in place, and that will work for the GXP customers. So that we need to do. Now you add AI, it's even more, right? The model itself, we don't know, like if you're using Chat GPT via APIs, right? You're giving it data now. So I cannot accept it because you need to have Chat GPT within your own instance, right? Because
correct. Yeah.
If the data cannot leave your thing, either you start from scratch and train it, or if it comes with a pre-trained model data, then you cut it off. After that, you cannot just put it into some public space and expect everything to be okay. No, it's I'm pretty sure these guys will learn, right? When it's a controlled environment, they have to deploy that a pre-trained model within a closed, whether it's in the cloud or non-cloud, doesn't matter. It's in some kind of a space that only I control. After that, the data doesn't leave, right? It's only I have to put in. So those things become even more important. The data governance, not just from creating records, but also where is the model, how is the data being ingested, where is the training data, all that becomes very important, I think.
Yeah, definitely agree with you, because it's still a challenge. Like you said, even without AI, it's been a challenge. And fundamentally, like you said, every computer system or software is either creating, processing, or doing something with data, right? Now, each data element might have different risk associated with it. So some data, if it's corrupted, you could probably live with it or you could trace it back. But there's other elements that are very sensitive that if it's corrupted or goes into a wrong environment or to a wrong person, that could be disastrous, for the company or for whoever is using that. So yeah, it's a very interesting space, and obviously we'll see how it evolves in the next 5 or 10 years. Thank you so much for coming. I have to ask you a few more questions about when you post on LinkedIn. I see you're based in Florida.
Yes, we are headquartered in Jacksonville, Florida, and we have offices in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, and Mumbai, and we are very close to starting one in Singapore also.
Nice.
So these are the four locations mainly right now. But we serve global clientele, because for us, especially in the continuous validation space, it really doesn't matter where we are. If it's a SaaS application, we can. My team is in Mumbai. The software development, software testing happens in out of Mumbai. So even within India, mostly it's concentrated in Mumbai, but also we have teams remotely, also working remotely as well.
Great, great. So, like, are there any exciting features or items that you're working on that you can share?
Yeah, one thing we are trying to build right now is one is we are looking at a platform where data is in highly controlled environment on one platform. So what happens is if you're a smaller biotech, for example, let's say I'm not talking about the enterprise. They already have many applications.
Yep.
It's too complex. One single application will never be enough for them. Like Johnson and Johnson's of the world, right?
Yep.
That will be the case. I'm talking about smaller to medium-sized biotech companies, medical device, pharma companies. So when they go from phase 2 to phase 3, then they'll start, okay, they'll start getting serious, right? Now validation becomes serious because they're going to go commercial. Everything becomes a big deal because one snafu, then it can get delayed, which
Yes.
they don't want that to happen. So for that clientele, our goal is to develop data center in a box, meaning it's a cloud data center we have come up with about 20 services. Some of them are core, some of them are optional, but together it should give you the data governance. So it's from a cybersecurity, data backup, archiving, all that is covered. Data monitoring, audit trail monitoring, all that is covered in the data governance layer. But all the data resides in one in one database, you can say. It's not exactly a database, but in one storage location where every app can access it. Now, on this, you build many apps. It could be document management, IT ticket management, risk management, audit trail monitoring app, validation, which will run, meaning all the apps should get validated. It could be operations monitoring, infrastructure monitoring. So we are coming up with about 90 to 20 services that we're going to build. We're in the process of building that right now. And every app will have its own validation module, which will constantly test, make sure that the app is working properly. And so the customer will get all these apps. So if you come to me, let's say, and say, I need 10 services, these are out of your 20, these are 10 are important to me, build a data center for me. We can build that in 3 weeks, with best practices baked in and validated. We'll deliver that as validated. That's what we're working on right now. So we call it the data integrity suite. So it includes continuous validation, but it includes all the apps also in a box, basically.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I'll whenever you have that close to a demo, I would love to see it because it sounds very, very interesting. Thank you so much for coming. I know like a lot of the stuff we talked about today is only going to resonate with the digital transformation, software validation, testing folks because you have so much experience in that area and everything that you're doing with XLM. So thank you so much for coming on to the show, and I wish you all the success with XLM, and feel free to reach out if I can help you with anything or we can collaborate, because I feel like even my consulting projects are very similar to the kind of work you're doing. So I would love to maybe work on a project with you for one of the clients.
That will be fantastic. Harsh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here.
Yep. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.